Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real today. Sometimes the loudest love in the room is the one that never speaks. Sometimes the deepest feelings don't come wrapped in words, flowers, or long text messages. They come wrapped in silence, and if you don't understand silence, you'll misread love every single time. When a man goes silent, most people assume he doesn't care anymore, but that's not always the truth. Sometimes silence is not absence, it's protection. A man who is secretly in love often becomes quiet not because his feelings are weak, but because they are overwhelming. He feels too much, and he doesn't know where to place those emotions safely. So instead of speaking, he guards them. He keeps his heart behind walls, not to shut you out, but to stop himself from falling too fast, too deep, too hard. You have to understand something about men. Many men were taught early on that emotions are dangerous, that love makes you lose control, that if you show how much you care, you give someone the power to hurt you. So when a man realizes he's falling in love, especially unexpectedly, his first instinct isn't to confess. His instinct is to pull back just enough to breathe. That silence is him trying to regain balance, not him trying to disappear. You'll notice that even when he goes quiet, he doesn't completely leave. He still watches. He still checks in. He still finds reasons to stay connected without exposing his heart. He may respond late, but he always responds. He may say less, but his presence never fully fades. That's because his silence isn't rejection, it's restraint. He's holding himself back because he's afraid that if he lets go, he won't be able to stop loving you. Silence is also how a man tests his own emotions. He steps back to see if the feeling passes. He asks himself, is this just attraction or is this something deeper? And when the silence doesn't erase you from his mind, when your absence makes him restless instead of relieved, that's when love becomes undeniable. But instead of admitting it, he often retreats even more because now the stakes feel higher. A man in love but afraid will choose silence over confession because silence feels safer. Words create expectations. Words create responsibility. Words create the possibility of rejection. Silence allows him to stay close without risking everything. It's his way of loving you without losing himself. And here's the part most people miss. If he truly didn't care, his silence would feel empty. You wouldn't feel his energy. You wouldn't sense his attention. But when his silence feels heavy, when it feels loaded, when you can feel him even when he's quiet, that's not indifference. That's emotion being suppressed. Men don't always express love the way women expect. Sometimes love shows up as distance, not because he wants space from you, but because he's trying to control what you do to his heart. His silence is him fighting his feelings, not denying them. Some men don't fall in love with words. They fall in love with responsibility. They don't know how to say what they feel, so they show it in what they do. A man who is secretly in love may never sit you down and confess his heart, but his actions will start speaking long before his mouth ever does. Love for him becomes a behavior, not a conversation. You'll notice that he starts doing things that don't benefit him directly. He makes time when it's inconvenient. He helps without being asked. He shows up when there's nothing in it for him except your comfort. These are not random acts of kindness. These are quiet investments. A man does not invest effort, energy, and consistency into a woman he doesn't care deeply about. What's powerful is that he doesn't announce these actions. He doesn't expect praise or recognition. In fact, if you thank him too much, he may brush it off like it was nothing. That's because admitting effort would force him to admit intention, and intention would force him to admit feelings. So he minimizes what he does, even though he never stops doing it. Pay attention to protection. A man in silent love becomes protective in subtle ways. He checks if you got home safely. He notices when something feels off. He steps in when you're overwhelmed, not to control you, but to carry weight you didn't ask him to carry. Protection is one of the most honest expressions of love in a man because it's instinctive, not calculated. He also starts adjusting himself for you. He changes habits without telling you. He becomes more patient, more careful with his words, more aware of how his actions affect you. These changes happen quietly because they come from care, not obligation. Nobody changes for someone they don't value. Another sign is reliability. A man who isn't serious is inconsistent by nature, but a man who loves you silently becomes dependable. He may not promise forever, but he keeps his word in small things. He calls when he says he will. He remembers dates that matter to you. He follows through. Consistency is emotional commitment, wearing work clothes. And even when he's stressed, distracted, or overwhelmed, he still makes space for you. Not always with long conversations, but with presence, a message, a call, a check-in, something that says, you're still here with me. That's not casual behavior. That's attachment. Men who show love through actions often do so because actions feel safer than words. Words expose vulnerability. Actions allow him to love you without saying the thing that scares him most. But don't underestimate those actions. They are his confession, just spoken in a language many people forget to listen to. When you learn to read behavior instead of waiting for declarations, you'll realize that some men have already told you they love you, just not out loud. Consistency is not exciting, it's not dramatic, and it doesn't come with grand speeches, but it is one of the clearest signs of real love, especially when a man is afraid to admit how he feels. A man who is secretly in love may pull back emotionally. He may struggle to express himself, but what he will not do is disappear. Even in his distance, there is a steady presence that never fully breaks. You'll notice that no matter what mood he's in, no matter how busy life gets, he keeps a line open. He may not talk every day, but the rhythm stays intact. There's a pattern to his behavior that feels reliable. That kind of consistency is not accidental. People only maintain patterns with things that matter to them. A man who doesn't care comes and goes based on convenience. His attention depends on his mood, but a man who is silently in love shows up even when it costs him something. He stays connected when it would be easier to walk away. He remains available even when he doesn't fully understand his own emotions. That's commitment trying to exist without permission. Even when conflict arises, he doesn't cut you off completely. He may go quiet, he may need space, but he doesn't burn bridges. He doesn't block you, erase you, or act like you never mattered. Instead, he pauses. And after that pause, he returns. That return is important. It shows that no matter how uncomfortable his feelings become, he still chooses connection. Consistency also shows in the way he treats you over time. He doesn't suddenly become cold or disrespectful. His tone remains familiar. His care doesn't evaporate. A man who is losing interest gradually detaches. A man who is afraid of how much he cares holds the line while trying to protect himself. Another thing to notice is how he maintains support. He remembers what's happening in your life. He checks on outcomes, not just beginnings. He asks how things turned out, not just how they started. That means you're not a moment to him, you're a process. He's invested in your journey, even if he never names his role in it. Even during periods of silence, there is continuity. The connection doesn't reset every time you talk. You don't have to reintroduce yourself emotionally. There's a sense that nothing was lost, only paused. That's a sign of emotional attachment that hasn't been broken, just restrained. Consistency is often mistaken for obligation or habit, but love-driven consistency feels different. It feels intentional. It feels steady. It feels safe even when it's quiet. A man who is secretly in love may never promise you the future, but he keeps showing up in the present. And that's the truth. Men who don't care don't stay consistent. Men who are unsure drift. Only a man who feels deeply, even if he's afraid of it, chooses to remain. When a man is secretly in love, he becomes a listener before he ever becomes a speaker. He may struggle to open up about his own emotions, but he pays close attention to yours. He listens not just to reply, but to understand. There is a difference. You can feel it in the way he pauses, in the way he remembers, in the way he brings things up later that you didn't even realize mattered. A man who isn't emotionally invested hears words and lets them pass. A man who is quietly in love stores them. He remembers your worries, your dreams, your fears, even the things you say casually. He may not comment in the moment, but later his actions reflect that he was listening all along. That's not coincidence. That's emotional attachment working silently. What's interesting is that while he absorbs so much from you, he reveals very little about himself, not because he doesn't trust you, but because exposing his inner world feels risky. Talking about his feelings would force him to confront them, and confronting them might push him to admit what he's been trying to hide. So instead, he keeps the focus on you. He asks questions. He encourages you to speak. He creates space for your emotions while guarding his own. This kind of man often knows more about you than you realize. He notices shifts in your tone. He senses when something is off. Even if you say you're fine, he can read your moods better than people who have known you longer. That level of awareness only develops when someone cares deeply and consistently. His silence about himself can be confusing. You might wonder why he won't open up, why he seems emotionally distant at times. But distance doesn't always mean lack of feeling. Sometimes it means there is too much feeling with nowhere to put it. He's afraid that if he starts talking, everything he's been holding back will spill out. Another sign is that he respects your emotions. He doesn't dismiss how you feel or rush you through difficult moments. He may not have perfect advice, but he stays present. He listens without trying to fix everything. That presence is a form of love many people overlook because it doesn't announce itself. He also remembers emotional details, not just events, but how those events made you feel. He recalls what hurt you, what made you smile, what made you doubt yourself. And over time, he adjusts how he treats you based on that knowledge. That is, someone who is emotionally invested, even if he never says the words. A man who listens deeply but speaks carefully is often fighting an internal battle. He wants closeness, but he fears vulnerability. He wants connection, but he fears exposure. So he chooses silence for himself while offering understanding to you. That balance, listening more than speaking, is not emotional absence. It is love restrained by fear, quietly revealing itself through attention. Jealousy doesn't always show up as anger or accusation. When a man is secretly in love, his jealousy often appears in the quietest ways. He doesn't demand explanations. He doesn't question your loyalty, and he doesn't confront you directly. Instead, his energy shifts. His tone changes. His silence becomes heavier. That quiet reaction is not indifference. It's emotion being swallowed. A man who doesn't care won't react when someone else has your attention. He won't notice who you're talking to, who you're laughing with, or who makes you light up. But a man who is in love notices everything, even when he pretends not to. He becomes more observant, more alert, because your value to him has increased. You might see it in the way he pulls back when another man is mentioned, not in anger, but in restraint. He may go quiet, respond less, or seem distant for a while. That distance isn't punishment. It's self-control. He's managing feelings he doesn't feel entitled to express because he hasn't claimed you or confessed his love. Another sign of quiet jealousy is comparison. He may subtly measure himself against other men in your life. He won't say it outright, but you'll hear it in small comments, in questions that seem casual but aren't. He wants to know where he stands without asking directly, because asking would reveal how much he cares. What makes this jealousy powerful is that it's protective rather than possessive. He doesn't try to control you. He doesn't limit your freedom. Instead, he watches, worries, and internalizes. That kind of jealousy comes from fear of loss, not desire for ownership. He's afraid of losing something he hasn't even claimed yet. You may also notice that during these moments, he becomes more attentive afterward. He checks in more. He becomes slightly more present, not to compete aggressively, but to remind himself and maybe you that he's still there. That's his way of re-anchoring the connection without exposing his heart. A man who is secretly in love often believes he has no right to feel jealous. He tells himself you're free, that he hasn't said anything, that you owe him nothing. So he buries the emotion instead of expressing it. But emotions don't disappear just because you ignore them. They leak out in behavior. The key difference is this: Indifference feels light. Quiet jealousy feels heavy. You can sense it. The room feels different. The connection feels tense, but intact. That tension is not lack of care, it's care under pressure. Jealousy like this is a sign that his feelings have crossed a line he didn't plan to cross. He's no longer neutral. He's emotionally invested, and even though he may never admit it, that quiet discomfort reveals how deeply he's already attached. Fear of loss is one of the most powerful forces in a man who is secretly in love, and it is often the reason he will never confess his feelings. When a man truly cares for a woman, the thought of losing her can be terrifying, even if she has no idea how he feels. That fear doesn't always show itself in dramatic gestures or words. Instead, it manifests in restraint, hesitation, and careful observation. He measures every move, every word, every glance, trying to protect what he feels without exposing it. The heart of a man in love is like a tightrope walker, every step calculated, every misstep potentially catastrophic. This fear doesn't mean he doesn't want closeness. It means he wants to be sure that when he allows himself to be vulnerable, the risk is worth it. The man in silent love watches from the sidelines, analyzes situations, and often talks himself out of confession because the stakes feel too high. What if she doesn't feel the same? What if admitting love changes everything and not in a good way? What if he loses her altogether? These what ifs haunt him, and the weight of potential loss keeps him quiet. He protects himself by keeping emotional boundaries. He may act distant or neutral in certain situations, not because he's losing interest, but because he's trying to safeguard his heart from rejection. Every interaction is carefully navigated. He smiles when he wants to hold your hand. He jokes when he wants to say something serious. He appears calm while an entire storm of emotion is brewing inside. That careful balancing act is his way of loving you without risking devastation. Despite this fear, his attachment to you is unwavering. He may retreat to process his emotions privately, but he always returns. He checks on you when you're upset, remembers the details